I'm in the big leagues, told her don't miss me. Ballin' like Houston, ayy, feeling like Whitney. I need a bag, bruh, send it through quickly. I'm making hits, dog, like I'm in the big leagues. Told him that I gotta go, dog. I'm riding the road, y'all. I think that I'm back in my bag now, so I need that go, y'all. Got hits when they throwin' the fastball, just too quick for it. Peeling off like the whip orange. Seen they effort this piss poor. I got too much I gotta tend to.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Another Turnover, the basketball podcast where a basketball fan with zero basketball credibility gives his opinions on what's going on in the NBA. Opinions that nobody asked for. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Chris Aaron Murphy, aka Ron. And ladies and gentlemen, let's just jump right into it. Folks, we got a lot to talk about on the show today. Season 3, Episode 5. We are rolling. Number 5 to stay alive. But I'm excited for hoops action coming up. So let's get right into it. So I thought for today's show what I would do is kind of just take a rundown of the standings and see where we're at in the early part of this season. We are about 12, 13 or so games into the season of a, how many, let's see. I don't know what the percentage is of that, but we still got a long way to go, like, 70 some odd games to go. So a long season ahead of us, but let's just take a look at the standings. Let's take a look at where we are, and we'll go from there. But I want to take a look at the Utah Jazz leading the Western Conference. So let's start with the Western Conference. Like I said, I want to take a look. I want to pull up here. Hold on just a second. Oh, perfect. That's what I need. But let's take a look at the Western Conference standings. So the Utah Jazz, they are 10-3 right now. Now, nobody anticipated them starting off and playing this well. Even if you live in Utah, like, you didn't guess this. You didn't guess it at all. But they have had some notable wins. I sent in a clip to NBA Today, basically talking about they were my biggest surprise of the season so far. I've talked about them on a couple episodes already. But they've beaten Denver. They've beaten Minnesota. They've beaten Memphis twice. You remember Memphis was my number one pick for the Western Conference, but not panning out so far, but that's okay. But they've beaten the Lakers twice, who hasn't beat the Lakers this season, and then the Los Angeles Clippers. So, like I said, hot start for the Utah Jazz. I mean, no one anticipated this. No one expected this. They have 6 players currently averaging double figures. So, I mean, you've got Lauri Markkanen, Jordan Clarkson, Mike Conley's in double figures. Pretty solid across the board for the Utah Jazz. Speaking of Lauri Markkanen, absolutely balling, 22.7 points per game, 9 rebounds, shooting a very efficient clip as well. Pretty much their primary scorer. Now, if you remember Lauri Markkanen coming into the league, he was, held in pretty high regard. I can't remember what draft pick he was, but I remember him on 2K a couple of years ago. I know this sounds funny, but I could ball out with Lauri Markkanen on 2K. Obviously, that doesn't translate to real life, but it says something. But I've definitely been impressed so far with this Utah Jazz team. They've got a tough schedule, though, for the remainder of November, for the remainder of the month. You have the Philadelphia 76ers they got to take on. They have to play the Phoenix Suns twice, Golden State once, and then the Los Angeles Clippers twice. So we'll see at the end of November if they're able to hold on to this number 1 spot. I don't anticipate it. Have I been wrong before? Of course, I'm wrong 90% of the time on this show. But that's the Utah Jazz, number 1 team in the Western Conference. Let's take a look at the second best team in the Western Conference, the Phoenix Suns, currently sitting at 8-3. Some pretty notable wins against Dallas, Golden State, the Los Angeles Clippers, and the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, as far as Phoenix goes, I know I had them lower on the totem pole this year, or the standings, I should say. I think I had them 6. If I'm not mistaken, I had them falling a bit from where they were last year. But I like what I've seen so far from the Phoenix Suns, especially from Cam Johnson, him being in the starting lineup. I felt he should have started over Jay Crowder anyway, but Cam Johnson putting up 13 points, shooting 43% from three-point range. So pretty solid production from Cam Johnson. I really like what I've seen from him. Devin Booker is having a near MVP caliber season. I wouldn't say he's my MVP caliber, or excuse me, I wouldn't say he's my MVP pick so far, but pretty solid outings that he has had so far. 27.5 points, 5.5 assists, shooting 40% from three-point range. So the Phoenix Suns, pretty decent so far, obviously being the second best team in the Western Conference. I really thought going into the season that the Robert Sarver issue with the owner was going to affect them more than people let on, but clearly that has not been the case. It's been a non-issue for them in terms of on-the-court basketball, which is great. I mentioned Jay Crowder. He is still away from the team. I don't know if it was him that requested a trade or if it was mutually agreed upon that the Phoenix Suns would look for a trade for him, but they could use him. I mean, Jay Crowder's a pretty solid role player, pretty solid 3-and-D guy, but Jay Crowder looking for a trade from the Phoenix Suns, so I'm assuming that's going to happen sometime before the deadline, but we'll see. The Portland Trail Blazers, third best Western Conference teams, also sitting at 8-3. They have been a surprise for sure in the early part of this season. I anticipated mediocrity from them, like I have for the past 4 or 5 years from the Portland Trail Blazers team. I've never ever seen them as a legitimate contender in the Western Conference, but they've had some good wins. They beat Phoenix twice. They've beaten Denver. They've also beaten Miami. So they've had some pretty solid outings. Damian Lillard is doing his thing. We know what he's all about. 28 points per game. No shock there. Anthony Simons playing pretty well. I know he got a really good extension from Portland not that long ago. I think it was over the summer, if I'm not mistaken. But he has shown himself to be the pretty solid number 2 to Damian Lillard, being the Robin to his Batman, putting up 22 points per game. So I like what I've seen from the Blazers as well. I believe Jeremy Grant is also averaging about 18 points per game too. So pretty solid from them so far. But the fourth best team in the Western Conference, you also have the Nuggets sitting at 8-3 as well. So I guess 2 and 4, you basically have a 3-way tie there. But the Denver Nuggets pretty solid so far. They've beaten Golden State. They've beaten the Utah Jazz, who have been beating everyone. Their star players are back from injury now. You have Michael Porter Jr. averaging 18 points per game, shooting 48% from three-point range. That's pretty incredible. I was looking at that. I was looking at his statistics before, and I was putting together the show, and I was like, holy cow. Michael Porter Jr., I knew he could shoot threes, but that's amazing. But you also have Jamal Murray back. Their star point guard, their all-star caliber point guard, is back, averaging about 15 points per game as well. Lots of people high on the Nuggets this year, deservedly so. Nikola Jokic back-to-back MVP. Some people are thinking he's looking to go for the trifecta, something that has not been done, I believe, since Larry Bird back in the day, if I'm not mistaken. So pretty solid from the Denver Nuggets. I like what I've seen from them as well. Fifth spot in the Western Conference, you have the Memphis Grizzlies sitting at 8-4, who've had some pretty solid victories against the Brooklyn Nets. They've beaten the Portland Trail Blazers as well. Their backcourt has been balling out. Like the Memphis Grizzlies, there was a reason I picked them to be the number 1 seed this year. I mean, I think they were the second best seed behind Phoenix last year, if I'm not mistaken. The Memphis Grizzlies have been solid. They have been really solid. Desmond Bane putting up 24.7 points per game, which is insane to me. He's averaging that many points already. He's an incredible three-point shooter. 46% from three-point range, but also putting in 5 rebounds and 5 assists. So pretty all around from him. Ja Morant, I mean, we know who he is. A perennial scorer, 29 points per game, 7 assists, 5 rebounds, also shooting 45% from three-point range. And that's not necessarily something that's a part of his game, but I really like what I've seen from the Memphis Grizzlies, and I think they are going to finish better than 5th in the Western Conference. And especially because they're still without Jaren Jackson Jr., so he was arguably their second best player behind Ja Morant. So I am anticipating some solid things from the Memphis Grizzlies. Number 6, though, let's move on to number 6. You have the Dallas Mavericks at 6-4 on the season right now. Some notable wins against Toronto, Brooklyn, Utah, and Memphis. I mean, we know the name of the game for the Dallas Mavericks. It's Luka Magic, Luka Doncic, averaging 35 points per game. I think it's like 34.8, but round up 35 points per game. 8 rebounds, 8 assists, absolutely dominating. I mean, the MVP race, it's his to win. Like, if he puts up those numbers, he's pretty much going to win it. Like, I'm sorry for anybody else who thinks it's it. I just think he's such a media darling. They want to give it to him. I think if he puts up those numbers for the remainder of the season, which is a long season to go, I think he'll end up getting the MVP. But I really loved their pickup of Christian Wood in the offseason. Off the bench, he's averaging 15.6 per game, 15.6 points per game, 7.8 rebounds. I really think so far probably the leading contender for Sixth Man of the Year, if I'm not mistaken. But pretty solid production from Christian Wood. Seventh spot, you have the Los Angeles Clippers at 7-5. They have beaten the Los Angeles Lakers twice. They've also beaten their really good Cleveland Cavaliers as well. Now, the Clippers have, a pretty deep team overall. I mean, they pretty much play 10, 11 guys on most nights and most of the games that I've seen. Still missing Kawhi Leonard. He played the first 2 out of the 3 games of the season and has not played since. Knee management. I already kind of talked about Kawhi Leonard last week, so I won't go too into that, but no word as of yet when he is coming back. So a lot of ambiguity there with Kawhi Leonard, but the Clippers are still holding it down, which is to be expected because, of how deep their team is. But let's talk about the final playoff spot, standard playoff spot. The New Orleans Pelicans sitting at 6-5 on the season, beating Brooklyn earlier this year, beating the Dallas Mavericks, also beating the Chicago Bulls. Lots of eyes on the Pelicans this year with Zion Williamson, being back. CJ McCollum, obviously, as, one of their main scorers, as well as Brandon Ingram. Really, really talented New Orleans Pelicans team. They played well for the most part. I know Brandon Ingram was out for a number of games this season. The name of the game really for them is going to be, can Zion Williamson stay healthy? He's played in 9 of the 11 games so far. So far in the early part of the season, he's been holding it down. He's been playing pretty well. I don't have his stats up. Let me see here. Zion Williamson, because I thought I had it pulled up here. 22.7 points per game, 6.7 rebounds per game, true shooting percentage at 58%. So pretty solid overall. His shooting percentage from 3-point range is actually 40%. I don't think he's taken that many threes, but Zion Williamson playing pretty well so far, which is not a surprise there. Now, out of the 8 playoff spots here, standard playoff spots, I'm not talking about playing as, just as of right now, but noticeably absent are the defending champion Golden State Warriors, who are sitting at 4-7 on the season. The main reason for their record, they're pretty bad on the defensive end so far in the early part of this season. And Steve Kerr has said that in a number of different press conferences. I think Draymond Green said it as well, of how bad defensively they've been playing. And I've kind of seen a bit of that. I think part of it is also a bit of championship hangover as well. But they just have not been great on the season so far. Does that mean that the Golden State Warriors are going to miss the playoffs? More than likely not. I mean, if you got Steph Curry on your team, with the collection of talent that they have, that would be shocking for them to miss the playoffs, especially just coming after winning the championship. So I definitely see them getting it together here soon and, being back close to where they were. I don't even see Golden State, having, being top 3 in the West. I could see them falling to 4-5 on the regular season, and then when the playoff goes, they just, run the table. But we'll see. I've been wrong before, like I said. Los Angeles Lakers, though, are noticeably absent from that top 8 spot at 2-9. Like I said, who hasn't beaten the Lakers this season? I think I don't even know who their 2 victories are against. Let's see here. Who are the sorry teams that have lost to the Lakers this year? Because it's not very many. I think did they beat the Kings? Let's see. So they beat the Pelicans in overtime on November 2nd, and then they beat the Nuggets on October 30th. So October 30th was their first victory of the season. But the Lakers, I've talked about them multiple times on the show. Kind of sick of talking about them. Just a poorly constructed team. Now, I will give them some credit. Russell Westbrook off the bench has played well. I have to give him credit for that. He looks good with that second unit. He's been finishing the games. So head coach Darvin Ham for the Los Angeles Lakers was talking about, hey, we got to have everybody buy in. If Russ buys into that second unit, still don't see them making the playoffs, but he looks good. I will give them credit for that. And LeBron James looks pretty bad, but that's a story for another day. But anyway, let's take a look at the Eastern Conference and see what the standings are for them. But before we do that, obviously, I got to talk about some NFL football. So if you know me in real life, I'm a Giants fan. My dad was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. So we grew up rooting for most of the New York teams in major sports. But my Giants playing pretty well. I think they're 6-2, if I'm not mistaken. I think they had a bye last week, so 6-2. And it's just well within making the playoffs in the NFC East, which is pretty strong this year. But if you want to learn more about NFL, specifically fantasy football, you got to talk about Leatherbrains, or you got to listen into, Leatherbrains with my buddies Hunter Slapdog Amaruso and Matthew Scotty Holtmeyer. They are fantastic. I know a good friend of ours, Anthony, will be on the show as well. And I really like their analysis. I really like the way that they break things down. The trade deadline from the NFL was a few weeks back, and I learned a lot from them. So tune in to Leatherbrains on all of your favorite all of your podcast platforms or YouTube, and that's Leatherbrains with a Z. But all right, let's transition. Let's talk about the Eastern Conference, and let's take a look into the standings. So we got to talk about number one. We got to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. They are rolling, like I talked about last week. 10-1, have beaten Philadelphia on the season, Brooklyn, Atlanta. They are just firing on all cylinders, and I'm loving it. Giannis has been strong early in terms of his case for MVP, putting up numbers that we know he can put up: 31 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists per game, doing all of that without their second best player, his Robin, and that's Chris Middleton, who was still out dealing, I can't remember if it's his wrist or his knee, but still dealing with an injury. But at this point, they can take their time and not bring him back for a minute. But the Milwaukee Bucks are playing very, very well, and I like what I've seen from them. But the second best team has also been playing very well, and that's the Cleveland Cavaliers. They are 8-3 on the season, and I also really like what I've seen from them so far. Donovan Mitchell has been putting up some solid numbers. Let me take a look here because I actually had his statistics pulled up. They were showing he's career high in almost every statistical category, I think. He's averaging 31.9 points per game, 5.8 assists, 4.2 rebounds, shooting 51% from the field and 44% from three-point range. So Donovan Mitchell playing absolutely incredibly right now, and I really like what I've seen from them. But they have nearly 7 players in double figures. I really like the collection of talent that they have, and I really like their young talent as well. So I could see Cleveland making a deep playoff run. I really like what I've seen from them. I think I actually had them third in the Eastern Conference preseason. Obviously, they're sitting at second. But speaking of third team that's actually tied record-wise for the with the Cleveland Cavaliers, are the Boston Celtics, who are also sitting at 8-3 on the season. They're obviously starting better than I anticipated. I think I had them finishing season 5th, if I'm not mistaken. With the whole Ime Udoka situation coming out right before the season, I was like, that could, cause some issues for them. Clearly, I was wrong about that, noticing a trend. But they are playing better than I anticipated. Joe Mazzulla has the team playing pretty well. Honestly, 2 of their losses have come against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and both of those games went into overtime, and I believe came down to the last shot. So Cleveland Cavaliers the Boston Celtics having a pretty solid season so far, and they've been playing pretty well. So also sitting at 8-3. But you have the 4th best team in the Eastern Conference, the Atlanta Hawks, who have been playing pretty well. You have DeJounte Murray and Trae Young seem to have found their groove together on the court. I really like, what I've seen from the games that I've seen with them playing together. I'm still a little sad that DeJounte Murray got traded away from San Antonio, but I guess the Spurs weren't going to pay him, so get your bread. I'll never be upset about a player going after their money, because you only get a certain amount of time to make money like that in pro sports. But Hawks at 7-4, I really like what I've seen from them so far. 5th best team in the Eastern Conference, the Toronto Raptors, 7-5 on the season. I mean, the name of the game with the Raptors, they remind me a lot of the Spurs overall in the sense that they don't necessarily have a traditional. Well, I mean, the Spurs had Duncan and Parker and Ginobili, but they have a really good collection of talent. It's not necessarily an MVP caliber player. You have solid coaching. You have a winning culture up there in the north in Toronto. I really like what I've seen from Pascal Siakam's kind of resurgence. We haven't really seen him play this well since that 2019 championship team when they beat the Golden State Warriors in the finals. But he's at 24.8 points per game, 9.3 rebounds, 7.7 assists, playing very well, shooting 47% from the field, 34% from three-point range. So Pascal Siakam playing pretty well, has his Raptors team so far with a winning record in the early part of the season. But, excuse me. Number 6 in the Eastern Conference, you got the Chicago Bulls at 6-7 on the season. They're still dealing with some injuries. Lonzo Ball is still out. I don't believe there's a timetable for his return. Zach LaVine was out of the lineup for the first few games of the season. I believe he is back now, though. But, I like the collection of talent that they have. I really like, who is it? Is it Vucevic? Yeah, Vucevic's game. I really like Alex Caruso. He is one of those, those hustle, dirty plays guys that I really like to see on the court. But I don't see them making a deep playoff run. I think they get bounced in the first round again, depending on who their matchup is. Right now, they'd be matched up against the Celtics if the playoffs were to start today. They're not beating the Celtics. I don't see them beating Cleveland. I don't see them beating Milwaukee. So, that 4, well, no, they're 6 right now. Yeah, I just don't see them making a deep run, but we'll see. 7th spot goes to the New York Knicks at 5-6. I don't really see much coming from them either. From New York, they're mostly okay defensively, below average on offense as well. If they make the playoffs too, I think it'd be very similar. I think they'll end up being a first round exit from the playoffs. And this next team, the 8th best team in the Eastern Conference, I don't see them making the playoffs at all. The Wizards, they're 5-6, similar to New York, just very run-of-the-mill, very mediocre. Bradley Beal is, just happy to get his bag, which there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, I'm never going to be upset about a player getting paid. But what I don't particularly care for about Bradley Beal, not him as a person, just his situation. He stayed in Washington. He got the 5-year, $200-some-odd million extension, which, hey, kudos to you. I love that. Get your money. But he said he was committed to winning in the NBA and not wanting to be one of those players that just got paid. Well, buddy, you probably would have left Washington if that was the case. Nothing is going to come of Bradley Beal being in Washington in terms of a championship. It's just not. Them winning the championship would probably be the biggest upset ever in all of pro sports history. So I don't see anything happening anytime soon with the Washington Wizards. But hey, like I said, I'm never going to be upset about a player getting their bread. Get your bread, buddy. But notably absent from the top 8 spots in the Eastern Conference, obviously the Philadelphia 76ers at 5-6 on the season. Playing without James Harden. He's going to be out for next month or so. I can't remember if it was his hamstring or knee, but he's going to be out for an extended period. The Brooklyn Nets, notably absent from the top 8 spots as well at 5-7. Obviously, the situation with Kyrie's been going on. Steve Nash just recently got fired. They've won their last 2 of 3, though, if I'm not mistaken. So they've played pretty well over the past couple days. But you also have Miami Heat are 4-7 on the season. So I don't know if they've been dealing with any injuries. I actually didn't have time to, take a look into where they have been at for this season, but I was surprised to see that. I was like, wait, somebody else is missing from the top 8. I was like, oh yeah, it's the Miami Heat. What the heck? What's going on? But 4-7 on the season. So those 3 teams, oh man, the Eastern Conference is really good. I could see the Knicks and the Wizards falling out of 7th and 8th, and Philadelphia and Brooklyn getting back in there. But Miami, I don't know. There's only 8 spots, so somebody's got to lose. But it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening there. But I'm going to real quickly talk about some of the biggest games of the week. Obviously, there were no games on election night. NBA trying to promote, people going out to vote and, make their voices heard, which I absolutely respect and I absolutely love. Most of the games were on Monday. Then you had some games yesterday, which is Wednesday, but you're listening to this on Friday. But Atlanta beat Milwaukee on Monday, 117-98, and all of Milwaukee's players played minus Chris Middleton, who's still out with an injury. So I thought that was a pretty solid victory. Boston beat Memphis in a very close game, 109-106. Boston has been pulling out a lot of these close games, except for those 2 overtime games against Cleveland. I really hope we see that in the playoffs, because I think that's going to be a really good series. Dallas beat Brooklyn in a nail-biter, 96-94. Kevin Durant had a very solid game, but came just short of beating Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks on Monday. And then the Clippers actually beat Cleveland without, obviously, Kawhi Leonard. That was 119-117 on Monday. So those games all took place Monday. Solid victory from the Los Angeles Clippers. Wednesday, you had the Utah Jazz beating the Atlanta Hawks 125-119. They just keep on winning so far. I don't know when this Cinderella run is going to end. Maybe it won't. Maybe it will. But solid outing from the Utah Jazz. But before we wrap up here, let's go ahead and take a look at the marquee matchups for the week. But before we do that, let's take a look at last week and see how we did, or see how I did. So we had the Portland Trailblazers beating the Phoenix Suns, the New Orleans Pelicans beating the Atlanta Hawks, and then the Toronto Raptors beating the Chicago Bulls. So again, 2 for 3 for me on the week. I had the Pelicans beating the Hawks. I had the Raptors beating the Bulls. I did not pick the Portland Trailblazers to beat the Phoenix Suns. Now, funny enough, Phoenix has only lost 3 times all season. 2 of those losses against the Portland Trailblazers. So something I did not take into factor. Damian Lillard wasn't playing in that game, and I don't think Anthony Simons played in that game either, if I'm not mistaken. And they still beat Phoenix. So big upset. I think everybody who played beat the Suns. So I mean, pretty crazy. Everybody who played marquee matchups last week picked the Suns to beat the Portland Trailblazers. Nobody got it right. So nobody went 3 for 3 last week. But this week, some really good games, I think, on the schedule for the weekend. So Friday's game is Denver and Boston. I think I'm going to go ahead and take Boston to win that one at home. It's going to be in the Garden, or TD Garden. You have the Brooklyn Nets taking on the Los Angeles Clippers. Obviously, no Kawhi Leonard, no Kyrie Irving. I'm going to take Brooklyn on the road. I'm going to take Brooklyn to win on the road against the Clippers. And then you have Utah taking on Philadelphia. Obviously, there's no James Harden. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick Utah. Watch they end up losing when they've been doing all this winning. I'm going to pick them, but I'm going for it. I'm going to pick Utah to win this game Sunday against the Philadelphia 76ers. So I've got Boston winning at home, Brooklyn winning on the road, and Utah winning on the road as well. But ladies and gentlemen, that is all the show I have for you fine folks this wonderful Friday. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, whatever you got going up or coming up. Thanksgiving's coming up, so get your food and get your menu in order, because inflation and shortages are a real thing. So I want everybody to have all the food that they want on Thanksgiving. But if you could do all the good things, like, share, subscribe, leave comments, I would appreciate it. Like I said, take care, have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.
In my bag now, so I need that go, y'all. Got hits when they throwing the fastball. Just too quick for it, peeling off like the whip orange. Seen they effort, this piss poor. I got too much, I gotta tend to. Car payments and the rent due. Told y'all that I'm 6 foot, but with the money stepping.